New York City's mayor wants to give police and other first responders the ability to hospitalize homeless people who appear to be experiencing a psychotic break, even without their consent. The move is in response to growing pressure to address crime in the city, especially on the subways.
There are too many people on our streets that are not capable of taking care of their basic needs, and they are in danger to themselves. That is the category. I don't know why we write these stories that everyone who talks to themselves is going to be taken to a hospital. That is just not true. Everyone who's living because they're homeless is going to be taken to the hospital. That is not true. We have a very specific category that we are looking to see if they are going to go to a hospital, and the determination is going to be made if they need additional care, and that is what we are accomplishing.
According to the Coalition for the Homeless, there are more than 60,000 homeless people living on the streets and in shelters in New York City every night. That includes close to 20,000 children. But the mayor's plan has been met with backlash from civil rights groups and advocates for the homeless who say it's not as helpful as it seems. Let me bring in my guest to discuss. Joining me tonight is Mina Malik. She's a senior partner at the Cochran firm here in New York. Now, Mayor Eric Adams calls this a moral obligation to act. But is the method ethical? And more importantly, is it legal? So I'll start with that, Counselor. Is this a legal act taken by the mayor? Does he have the legal scope and capacity to do this?
So that's a great question, Eboni. In fact, there are many legal authorities and legal organizations throughout New York City who are already looking at the potential challenges to this new initiative that the mayor has imposed upon New York City. Basically, what the initiative is that New York City police officers and outreach workers, including fire department, as well as EMS and healthcare workers, to have the authority to take the mentally ill off our streets and put them into hospitals when they appear to be a danger to themselves or to others, or when they can't meet their basic needs. And so a lot of the groups in New York City have found that this is a questionable authority that the mayor has imposed, and it'll be interesting to see whether he can do that. There are a number of laws in New York that are already in existence that allow for an involuntary commitment, but they require that certain steps be followed so that people can be involuntarily committed into a hospital or a psychiatric institution.
And do we know, Counselor, if there's any distinction between those existing laws, which are on the books, as you mentioned, and what is the mayor doing here that's different or new?
What this means basically is that they can take them to a hospital where they can be psychiatrically evaluated. Mm-hmm. And if there's reason to help them, they can be offered services. But what happens right now is the hospitals in New York City are already overwhelmed. I happened to be at one New York City hospital the other night in the emergency room, and there were beds lined up along the wall and people outside of bays because the hospital workers and the hospitals in New York City are all already overwhelmed. But here in this particular scenario, if the person is deemed to be in need of services, the mayor's initiative plans to implement those services and give those services to those who need it. It obviously is involuntary, and I think that's one of the reasons that there are a lot of groups against this, is because they find that this is an involuntary imposition on a person who may not want services. And so the goal really should be to have people learn about services, learn about what their needs are, and actually want the services, as opposed to it being involuntary imposed upon them.
Oh, absolutely, of course. But I mean, there is a scenario, especially for those of us who have, worked inside the law and dealt with mentally ill. And mental ill, first of all, let's address the obvious point. That's a spectrum, right? That could be someone suffering from minor depression or anxiety, or someone that's a full-blown schizophrenic. And unfortunately, somebody with a severe case of mental illness might not have the legal capacity to even know or evaluate for themselves needs of treatment or the like. So I guess the question then becomes, what type of rights do the maybe unhoused homeless person or potentially mentally ill person have in terms of refusing treatment?
Right. So they have a number of rights under the federal and the state constitution in terms of when they can be held and how they can be held. And again, going back to the laws that are already in existence, Kendra's law for one, an involuntary commitment, there are a number of steps that have to be followed, where you have to show that the person has the incapacity to take care of themselves and meet their basic needs of food, shelter, clothing, health services, or they're a danger to themselves, or they're a danger to others. And then to have them evaluated based on those factors. And there has to be a petition to the court to actually keep them in involuntary confinement.
Absolutely. Another point of critique around the mayor's new policy and plan, as you said, Counselor, the expansion of law enforcement and other service providers being able to make really, high-level determinations, I would think, around someone's mental capacity. A lot of them have not had training to equip them for that. What about the knowledge and training requirement? What do we know about that?
Well, that's something that's imperative if this initiative is going to be successful. You have to have initially the funding for the training, and then you have to have the ongoing training, not only for police officers and first responders, but also for the clinicians who are going to be dealing with the people with mental health issues in the hospitals and the institutions when and where they arrive. So this is extremely important. You need the funding, you need ongoing training, you need to have accountability, and you need to be able to collect the data. And that's a very important point, because I think right now there's some talk about, well, we're not really going to collect data as to who's going to be brought in.
Okay, a lot more to unpack here. Mina, it's not going to go anywhere. We're going to look at some of the broader ramifications of this plan from the mayor, the existing law, and how we balance, public safety versus the rights of individuals. You're watching theGrio.
But there's a bunch of stuff I want to keep.
Can't afford to. We gotta sell it all. Clothes, picture frames, everything.
That's mine.
Hey! I paid for that guitar. I gave it to your father and he left it behind. This is my guitar.
All I want to do is play music. Why won't you let me?
Because nobody makes it.
I can make it. I'm good.
This month, watch Megan Price in A Country Christmas Story, right here on theGrio.